Delete her user access now. My father grunted, jamming a bent paperclip into the factory reset hole of my apartment's security panel. If she can't get in tonight, she can't stop us. I watched the live video feed from my desk at work. He wasn't breaking in. He was wiping my smart lock system to permanently delete my code. Behind him, my sister Bianca laughed. Finally, this place is wasted on her anyway. They were locking me out of my own penthouse so they could take it over. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I picked up my phone and made one call. Not to the police. To my landlord. Before I tell you what I did when I saw my own father factory resetting my life, tell me in the comments. Have you ever trusted family with a key, only to have them use it against you? Let me know where you're listening from. On the screen, my mother was pointing at my vintage Italian sofa. That has to go, she said, her voice muffled but distinct. Bianca wants beige. The lighting in here is too harsh for her aesthetic. I sat in my corner office downtown, watching my family dismantle my life like they were flipping a foreclosure. I'm 29. I manage crisis PR for tech CEOs who get caught embezzling. I spend my days reading subtext, predicting fallout, and neutralizing threats before they hit the news cycle. I know how to spot a hostile takeover, even when the aggressors are wearing cardigans. For years, I told myself their behavior was just eccentric parenting. Arthur and Linda were demanding. Bianca was spirited, but watching my father high-five my sister after successfully wiping my security access, the denial evaporated. It wasn't that they didn't love me. It was worse. They didn't see me at all. To Arthur and Linda, I wasn't a daughter. I was an asset. I was a high-yield savings account that had suddenly frozen its funds. When your toaster stops toasting, you don't sit it down and ask about its feelings. You don't feel guilty about unplugging it. You fix it, or you replace it. That was the logic governing that room. I was an appliance that had malfunctioned by refusing to hand over my keys voluntarily. Deleting my code wasn't a betrayal in their eyes. It was just a factory reset. They were troubleshooting the glitch. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a fireproof file folder. Inside was a document they had likely forgotten, or assumed I had thrown away out of familial loyalty. 3 years ago, when Bianca needed seed money for a swimwear line that never made it past the prototype stage, Arthur had begged me for cash. I didn't just give it to them. I drafted a promissory note. $65,000, classified as a business loan to my parents, secured by their personal assets, with a good faith clause that allowed for immediate recall if they acted against my financial interests. They signed it without reading, laughing at my corporate lawyer cosplay. They thought it was a joke. I looked at the signature on the page, then back at the screen where Bianca was currently kicking my coffee table to see if it would scratch. The sadness I expected to feel didn't come. Instead, a cold, familiar calm settled over me. It was the same feeling I got right before I walked into a boardroom to fire an executive board. If they wanted to treat our relationship like a transaction, I would oblige them. They wanted the apartment? They could have the apartment. But they were going to pay the market rate for the privilege. I picked up my phone and dialed. Not the police, that would be a civil dispute, messy and slow. I needed something absolute. I needed the one person who cared about that penthouse as much as I did. Mr. Vance, I said when he answered. It's Elena. We need to talk about my lease. I'm terminating it. Today. Mr. Vance, I repeated, my voice steady. I'm invoking the immediate termination clause. Section 14B. There was a pause on the line. Mr. Vance wasn't a warm man. He was a real estate shark who owned half the skyline. And he respected 2 things: punctuality and liquidity. Elena, he said, his tone wary. That clause requires a significant penalty. 3 months' rent, up front. I know, I said. $25,500. I'm authorizing the wire transfer right now. Check your notifications. I switched apps on my phone, my thumb hovering over the confirm button. $25,000. It was my savings for a down payment on a house. My safety net. My freedom fund. It physically hurt to look at the number, but then I looked back at the monitor, at my mother measuring the wall for a gallery of Bianca's modeling photos. The money wasn't just buying an exit. It was buying a weapon. I hit confirm. Done, I said. The money is yours. I'm surrendering the unit effective immediately. But I need one favor. I have movers packing up the last of the junk right now. They're difficult. I need you to conduct the final inspection at 5 p.m. sharp. Not a minute later. If the check clears, I don't care if you have circus clowns in there, Mr. Vance grunted. 5 p.m. If there's a scratch on those floors, it's coming out of your security deposit. Understood, I said. See you then. I hung up and took a deep breath. The trap was set, Now I had to bait it. I opened my smart home app. Arthur had wiped the keypad, but he hadn't disabled the remote admin access because he didn't know how. I re-enabled my own code, but set it to expire at 5 p.m. I left work early, driving home with a trunk full of supplies I'd picked up on my lunch break. When I walked into the penthouse, the silence was instant. Arthur froze near the kitchen island. Linda dropped a fabric swatch. Bianca, sprawled on my chaise lounge, looked up with a smirk. "Well," Bianca drawled. "Look who finally decided to show up. We were just discussing how to make this place less sterile." "You changed the locks," I said, keeping my voice flat. "We secured the asset," Arthur corrected, puffing out his chest. "Since you weren't using it properly." I looked at them, letting my shoulders slump. I let them see the defeat in my eyes. It wasn't hard to fake. I was exhausted. "You win," I said quietly. "I can't fight you on this. I'm tired." Linda softened immediately, mistaking surrender for compliance. "Oh, honey, it's for the best. You're always working anyway. You don't need all this space. Bianca needs a headquarters." "Fine," I said. "I'll leave. But I need to pack my things. I'm not leaving my valuables behind." "We can help," Linda offered, eager to smooth things over now that she'd gotten her way. "Actually," I said, "I could use the help. I have a lot of delicate items. Vintage, collectibles." I walked to the entry table and dropped a stack of flattened boxes. They were bright orange Hermes boxes and dark brown Louis Vuitton ones, dozens of them. "Pack everything in these. But be careful. These are the only things I'm taking." Bianca's eyes lit up at the sight of the designer packaging. Greed, pure and simple, washed over her face. They didn't know I'd bought the empty boxes online for $10 a pop from a prop house. They thought they were handling gold. "Let's get to work," I said. "We have to be done by 5. "Be careful with that one," I said, my voice sharp. "It's the 1920s edition. The binding is fragile," Arthur grunted, heaving the orange box onto the stack near the door. It was heavy, filled with 6 bricks, wrapped in bubble wrap and a layer of old law school textbooks I'd been meaning to donate. To him, it weighed like a retirement fund. For the next 4 hours, my penthouse became a sweatshop of greed. I sat on a bar stool, sipping sparkling water, playing the role of the defeated daughter while my parents labored like indentured servants. Linda was on her knees, meticulously taping boxes I had pre-filled with delicate porcelain, actually chipped mugs and heavy stones from my aquarium supplies. Bianca stood by the window, supervising, which mostly involved checking her reflection in the glass and complaining about the dust. "You really hoarded a lot of stuff," Bianca said, nudging a box with her toe. "I'm going to need this space clear for the launch party tonight. Are you sure all these are leaving?" "Every single one," I promised. "I wouldn't want to clutter your aesthetic." "Don't antagonize her, B," Linda panted, wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked older in the harsh afternoon light, her foundation settling into the lines around her mouth. "She's doing the right thing." Finally, I watched them work. It was fascinating. In a clinical way, my parents, who had never lifted a finger to help me move into my dorm, my first apartment, or this penthouse, were now breaking their backs. They weren't doing it for me. They were doing it for the perceived value inside those boxes. They believed they were securing collateral. In their minds, once I was out, they would store these boxes for me. And if I ever stopped paying their bills, one by one, my treasures would disappear onto eBay. I looked at Arthur, his shirt stained with sweat, struggling to lift a box I'd filled with old dumbbells. A thought struck me, clear and cold. This was the transaction they had always wanted. Growing up, the unspoken rule in our house was that my existence was a debt. They had fed me, clothed me, and housed me. Therefore, I owed them a lifetime of dividends. Every birthday check I sent, every crisis I fixed, was just interest payments on the loan of my birth. I had spent 29 years trying to pay off the principal, hoping that one day, the ledger would balance and they would just love me. But watching Arthur groan as he stacked another box, I realized the ledger was balancing right now. This sweat equity, this back-breaking labor, this was their payment. They were working off the debt of their entitlement. They were packing their own severance package. Brick by heavy brick. "You're awfully quiet," Arthur sneered, pausing to catch his breath. He gestured around the room, which was now filled with towers of orange and brown cardboard. "See what happens when you listen to us? You make things difficult for yourself, Elena. You always have. But in the end, you always fold." He slapped the tape gun against a box with a loud crack. "That's why we have to step in. To manage your assets properly." I looked at him. I didn't feel the usual sting of inadequacy. I felt the cool satisfaction of an auditor closing a fraudulent account. "You're right, Dad," I said, checking the time. It was 4:45 p.m. I should have listened sooner. I'm glad we're getting this sorted today. Almost done, Linda chirped, taping the final box. Just in time for the movers. Perfect timing, I said. I wasn't folding. I was just clearing the table before the house took everything. My alarm vibrated on my wrist. 4:55 p.m. The penthouse looked like a warehouse after a hostile takeover. Dozens of boxes were stacked haphazardly against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blocking the panoramic view of the sound. My parents were slumped on the remaining furniture, exhausted but triumphant. Bianca was pacing, checking her makeup in her phone camera. Okay, we're done, Bianca announced, snapping her compact shut. Now hand over the key fob. My guests start arriving at 6, and I need to do a final vibe check before they get here. Arthur stood up, groaning as his back popped. He wiped his hands on his pants, leaving streaks of dust. You heard your sister. Keys, and don't think you're getting a security deposit back from us. Consider the labor a wash. Linda was already mentally redecorating. We can put the DJ booth over there, she murmured, gesturing vaguely at the empty space where my dining table used to be. And the catering station near the kitchen. I stood up slowly. I smoothed my skirt. I picked up my purse and walked to the center of the room. I don't have the key, I said. Bianca stopped pacing. What? I don't have the key, I repeated, my voice pleasant. I surrendered it to the building management office at 9 a.m. this morning. Arthur frowned, confusion warring with irritation. Surrendered it? Why? Because the lease is terminated, I said. As of 5 p.m. today, this apartment is vacant. I don't live here anymore. The silence was profound. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. You're lying, Bianca spat. You're just trying to ruin my launch. Am I? I pulled out my phone and held up the email confirmation from Mr. Vance. Lease termination, acknowledged. Final walkthrough, scheduled. 5 p.m. I moved my actual furniture and valuables out 3 days ago, I continued, gesturing to the mountain of orange boxes they had just spent 6 hours packing. Those boxes? They're filled with old law textbooks I couldn't sell, some broken kitchen appliances, and about 50 pounds of bricks from my aquarium setup. Oh, and the vintage clothes? Those are Goodwill donations I've been meaning to drop off for months. Linda stared at the nearest box, the one she had taped with such reverence. But the Hermes box. I bought them empty on eBay, I said. $10 each. People buy them for staging. Arthur's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. You made us pack trash? I didn't make you do anything, I corrected. You volunteered. You wanted to secure my assets? You did. You secured my trash. Fix this, Bianca shrieked, her voice climbing an octave. Call the landlord back. Tell him it was a mistake. I have influencers coming in an hour. I sent out invites. I can't, I said. The wire transfer for the lease break fee has already cleared. $25,000. Non-refundable. Arthur took a step toward me. His hands were fists. You spent 25 grand just to spite us? I spent 25 grand to buy my freedom, I said. Worth every penny. You're not going anywhere, Arthur growled, moving to block the front door. He was big, and he was angry. And for the first time, the threat of violence hung heavy in the air. You're going to fix this, or you're going to regret it. Dad, I said, my voice dropping. Get out of the way. No, he said. You're staying right here until you get this apartment back. I looked at my watch. 5 p.m. I wouldn't do that if I were you, I said. Behind him, the elevator chimed. The elevator doors slid open with a smooth, expensive hiss. Bianca spun around. A bright, plastic smile plastered on her face, expecting her first wave of guests. Finally, you guys are... Her voice died in her throat. It wasn't a DJ or a caterer. It was a man in a charcoal suit that cost more than my father's car. He was flanked by 2 building security officers who looked like they were carved out of granite. Mr. Vance stepped into the foyer. He didn't look at the view. He didn't look at the boxes. He looked at his watch. Then at me. Miss Elena, he said, his voice gravel. 5 p.m. On the dot. Arthur stepped forward, chest puffed, trying to regain control of the room. Who the hell are you? This is a private family matter. Get out. Mr. Vance looked at Arthur the way a lion looks at a gazelle that has wandered into the wrong enclosure with mild curiosity and zero fear. I'm the owner of this building, he said, and you are standing in my unit. Uninvited. We're residents, Arthur blustered, gesturing to the boxes. We're moving things around. My daughter lives here. Actually, I interrupted, stepping around my father to stand next to Mr. Vance. I don't. I turned to face them. The transition was complete. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was the crisis manager, and they were the liability. Mr. Vance, I said, keeping my tone professional. This unit was surrendered to you at 9 a.m. this morning. The wire transfer for the lease break fee cleared at noon. As per our agreement, the apartment is vacant. I pointed a finger at my parents. These 3 individuals are intruders. They hacked the electronic lock system to gain entry while I was at work. I found them here when I arrived to complete the handover. They have refused to leave. Linda gasped. Elena, we are your parents. I don't have a lease, I said coldly. Which means I don't have the authority to let you stay. You aren't my guests. You're trespassing on Mr. Vance's property. Arthur laughed, a nervous, cracking sound. This is ridiculous. You can't just surrender an apartment like it's a library book. We have rights. We have possession. Mr. Vance tapped his clipboard with a silver pen. Possession implies a legal right to occupy. Miss Elena terminated her rights this morning. Since you are not on the lease, and you are not her guests, you are currently committing burglary. He stepped further into the room, his eyes scanning the space. He stopped at the wall, where Arthur had drilled 4 massive holes to mount a television for Bianca. He looked at the deep scuff marks on the hardwood floor where they had dragged the heavy boxes of books. And vandalism, Mr. Vance added, his voice dropping an octave. You've damaged the drywall and the imported teak flooring. We were improving it, Bianca shrieked. I'm an influencer. I was increasing the property value. Mr. Vance ignored her. He looked at the security guards. Secure the exits. Nobody leaves until the police assess the damages. Arthur's face went white. Police? Now hold on. We can work this out. Elena, tell him. Tell him we're just helping. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. He realized that his physical strength, his loud voice, his I'm your father card, none of it worked on a commercial real estate mogul with a legal team on speed dial. I can't tell him anything, Dad, I said. It's not my apartment. You set us up, Arthur hissed, stepping toward me. You let us pack all day. Sir. One of the security guards stepped between us, his hand resting casually on his belt. Step back. Arthur froze. He looked at the guard, then at Mr. Vance, then at the pile of orange boxes he had enslaved himself to pack. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't been packing my valuables. He had been packing evidence of his own unauthorized presence. Mr. Vance, I said. I'm happy to provide the security footage of them breaking the lock panel. My cloud backup is secure. Excellent, Mr. Vance said. He pulled out his phone. I'm pressing charges for criminal trespass and felony vandalism. The damage to the floor alone is $10,000. Bianca started to hyperventilate. Felony? I can't have a felony. My brand partnerships. You should have thought about that before you drilled holes in a stranger's wall, I said. The elevator chimed again. Bianca's head whipped around, hope flaring in her eyes. The guests, she whispered. But as the doors opened, it wasn't a party. It was 2 uniformed police officers. Responding to the priority call Mr. Vance's office had placed 10 minutes ago, the trap hadn't just snapped shut. It had bolted the door. The officers didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. Mr. Vance was one of the largest property owners in the city. And when his office called about a break-in in progress, the precinct sent a supervisor. These individuals are trespassing, Mr. Vance stated, his tone bored but authoritative. The tenant surrendered the lease this morning. These 3 broke in, disabled the security system, and have caused significant property damage. He pointed a manicured finger at the wall where my father had drilled holes for the TV mount. Vandalism. He pointed at the floor where Linda had dragged the heavy boxes of bricks. Destruction of property. He pointed at the pile of orange boxes. An attempted theft of assets they believed belonged to the former tenant. Arthur tried to step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture that usually worked on customers at his dealership. Officers, this is a misunderstanding. I'm her father. We were just... Step back, sir. The lead officer barked, hand resting on his holster. You are currently a suspect in a felony burglary. Do not approach the property owner. The blood drained from my father's face. The reality of the situation finally pierced his bubble of entitlement. He wasn't the patriarch here. He was just an intruder in a very expensive room. Escort them out, Mr. Vance ordered. I want them trespassed from the building. Permanently. The walk to the elevator was silent and humiliating. Linda was sobbing quietly, clutching her purse like a shield. Bianca was hyperventilating, her eyes darting between the police and the elevator numbers, terrified of who might be waiting in the lobby. When the doors opened on the ground floor, Bianca's nightmare scenario became reality. The lobby wasn't empty. It was filled with the first wave of her guests, local micro-influencers, a photographer she'd hired, and 2 girls from her old sorority she was desperate to impress. They were holding champagne glasses, waiting for the exclusive Penthouse launch. Instead, they saw their hostess being marched out by police, trailed by her parents who looked like they had been working in a coal mine, covered in dust and sweat. Bianca's survival instinct kicked in. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking as she opened Instagram Live. She held it up, aiming the camera at me and the police. "Guys, you won't believe this," she shrieked, forcing a tear. "My sister is scamming us. She lured us here, and now she's using the police to—" Mr. Vance didn't break stride. He reached out and plucked the phone from her hand with the ease of a parent taking a toy from a toddler. "Hey!" Bianca screamed. "That's my property. You are filming inside a private building during an active crime investigation," Mr. Vance said, locking the screen and sliding the phone into his suit pocket. "I'm confiscating this as evidence of the intrusion. You can retrieve it from the precinct evidence locker. In 3 to 5 business days." Bianca stood there, mouth agape, severed from her audience, stripped of her narrative. The guests in the lobby were already whispering. Phones out, recording the real show. The lifestyle brand was dead before it even launched. I stepped forward. I had one last piece of business. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick, legal envelope. I handed it to Arthur. "What is this?" he muttered, looking at the police officers flanking him. "The promissory note," I said. "The $65,000 you borrowed. Clause 4, Section C. Any action taken by the borrower that maliciously interferes with the lender's housing or employment constitutes a breach of good faith, rendering the full principal immediately due and payable." I smiled. "Locking me out of my home counts as malicious interference, Dad. You have 30 days to pay the full amount, plus interest, or I lien the house." Arthur stared at the envelope. He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see a resource. He saw a creditor. "Let's go," the officer said, guiding him toward the revolving doors. I watched them being escorted onto the sidewalk, 3 figures shrinking in the distance, leaving nothing behind but a lobby full of confused guests and a silence that felt like victory. The revolving doors spun shut behind me, cutting off the noise of the lobby, the whispers of the influencers, the stuttering protests of my father, the sharp click of Mr. Vance's heels. I stood on the sidewalk. The Seattle evening air was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of exhaust and salt water. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs until they ached. For the first time in 29 years, I wasn't holding my breath waiting for the other shoe to drop. I walked to my car, my heels clicking on the pavement. I realized then that I was technically homeless. I had no apartment to go back to. My furniture was in storage. My clothes were in a suitcase in my trunk. By all traditional metrics, I had lost. I had torched my living situation and blown $25,000 just to make a point. But as I unlocked my car door, I didn't feel like a loser. I felt lighter. Gravity seemed to have less of a hold on me. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled out my phone one last time. There were already 12 missed calls from my mother. 3 from Bianca. A voicemail from Arthur. I didn't listen to it. I didn't need to know what new threats or guilt trips he was inventing. The promissory note was already with my lawyer. The rest was just noise. I opened my contacts list. I scrolled to Mom. Block caller. I scrolled to Dad. Block caller. I scrolled to Bianca. Block caller. With 3 taps, the silence became permanent. The invisible umbilical cord of obligation that had strangled me for decades was finally severed. I had paid the debt of my existence with sweat equity and a very expensive lease break fee. The ledger was balanced. The account was closed. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up, casting a soft blue glow over my hands. I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb, merging into the stream of traffic leaving the city. I didn't look up at the penthouse windows. I didn't look in the rearview mirror to see if they were stumbling out onto the street. I just drove. I drove toward the highway, toward the mountains, toward a hotel room where I would sleep for 12 hours straight without a single nightmare about factory resets or override codes. The skyline faded behind me, replaced by the open road. I had nowhere to be. And for the first time in my life, that was exactly where I belonged. I drove away and never looked back. If you've ever had to fire your own family to save your sanity, share this story. You aren't alone.